Happy Friday, folks. Short week is coming to an end, and it's been a hell of a week. It's been jam-packed. There's all sorts been going on in our lives and your lives and everything. And tomorrow wraps up another level. We're finishing it off with Jeff Games tomorrow, which I'm super excited about. All the different workouts, and we're going to see how we can build on that. So marker in the sand, you can see how you're doing and reassess yourself every couple of weeks, which is epic. And this is the last ed for the session or for the week as well. And we're talking about organic foods. So something that often comes up, questions around organic. You know, what is it? Is it better for me? Should I be eating it? That's obviously what we've titled today. So I'm just going to talk through a little bit about it, the ins and outs, and some ideas from my side about it all. Everyone's got their own opinion, which is cool, and we'll kind of chat through them and just see what's all happening. So swipe in, let me know who's all here, how your week's going. If you're on the challenges, we're in the last week of it, so 3 days left to really drive things home, push hard, get your session in today and tomorrow, eat nice and tight. And then Sunday can be your assessment day, measurements, see how things are going. The stories have been absolutely epic, and I'm really looking forward to seeing some progress pics, which is going to be great. So let me know how you guys are all doing. Minnie is here. Hello, Minnie. Hopefully you are well. Let's bring up all the comments and see what's happening. So we'll give everyone a couple of minutes just before jumping into organic foods. Let me know if it's something that you try and do in terms of food choices that you're making. If they're, when you're doing your shopping, if you're looking out for it on labels, how it's all going, what your personal choices are about. Tracy is here. How's it, Tracy? How are you doing? I can't seem to bring up my other feed, which is fine. So let me know here as we go, any questions, fire away. Let's see if there's anything that comes to mind as I bring it up. Please just pop it into the comments. And once I've finished and gone through everything, you can let me know and we'll get back to it all. All right. All right. My other video is not playing on the Facebook group. But anyway, Nikki's here. Esmarie, hello. Swiping in for Tony's Transformers. Lovely. All right, guys. So I might as well jump straight into it. And I've got a couple of slides that I will bring up for you guys. And we will get straight onto that. So everything that we are doing today is all about the question, should I actually eat organic? So I just want to let you guys make an informed choice about it. So give you a couple of facts around it all, see how you feel about it. Maybe there's some misinformation out there, and if there's some questions and things that come of it, that's great. But as long as we're thinking about it, that's obviously the important part in it all. All right. So should I eat organic is what we are going about. So what is organic? In the scientific sense, essentially, it's based on something that contains carbon. Something can only be organic if it's got carbon in it with all the other elements, nitrogen, oxygen, whatever the case is. But in the food sense, it's got a completely different definition. And it speaks mainly to the way that things are grown and how they get to our plate. But we've kind of warped that a little bit. And it also ties in sort of health focus and there's marketing that goes into it. But at the heart of it, what organic food is food that is prepared and gets to us, that has no artificial fertilizers, chemicals, pesticides, any regulators or additions to food that make plants or livestock grow quicker or faster or bigger or whatever the case is. So at the heart of it, organic production methods strip away all of these unnatural additions in the farming sense of it all. All right. And oh, there we go. How it differs is traditional methods that are used. You'd include things like crop rotation, composting foods or composting ground, recycling of produced material. So that might be making use of animal waste or manure, It's doing hand weeding as opposed to pesticides to weed things, using other biologically friendly pest control. So it might be other little bugs or birds, or planting different crops that help with pest control as opposed to using pesticides. And there might also be homeopathic remedies that find their way into it, or using free range methods. So giving a bit more space to animals. They might, and I'll talk to this a little bit later in terms of sort of the grass-fed thing and how that all goes. But it might look at those aspects as well. So these are the traditional kind of organic methods that are used in the farm. And the primary goal of it is to ensure that the soil, the plants, the animals are, they function in a healthy ecosystem. So it's looking at things, kind of getting it back to balance, with the belief that more conventional methods, current day farming methods, are putting a strain on land, on animals, out of balance, over farming, overproduction. And this is sort of the motivation and trend behind it. Then organic products and organic farming methods still follow the same manufacturing practices. So they've still got to follow good manufacturing practices, put in place the same production methods, and have the same standards to kind of live up by. But quite often there's just additional things that they kind of need to check off for. There's a labeling legislation. I'll touch on this a little bit later, but South Africa, we lack it. Elsewhere in Europe and the States, for example, there's certain things that you've got to meet requirement-wise at a government level that is legislated. Here, we've got bodies that people would just register and have to live up to certain requirements to follow. There's still regard for food safety, and I'm going to chat on that bit. And there are a lot of things that are very similar to the rest of the food industry in terms of getting the food produced, prepared, and to you, but there's just another level on top of that to meet organic requirements. The big question about it is often whether it's actually better for you, and this is what, apart from the environmental reasons, which we might chat to a little bit, but also the health reasons, led to a big boom in organic farming and organic methods. And the little stat there, sort of the turn of the century, there was a 3-fold increase in the amount of produce produced that in those 10 years. So things went from, they just boomed. There was a big focus on trying to put a bit more effort into the land and environmental issues and the concern for livestock. And then there was the perceived health benefits of organic food. And it was a market that just exploded and exploded. And I mean, it's been 10 years since then. We can only imagine that's grown even further. All right. Food safety is something I want to chat on, talking about the farming methods and how it's grown. Organic food doesn't necessarily mean that it's just naturally safer for you, and food safety is always something we're going to talk to. So cooking and washing, as with any other food, is as important because organic foods are still exposed to other biopesticides. There can be contamination in the chain before it gets to you. It can be exposed to other pollutants. And obviously some of the methods used in farming would expose it to animal waste. So if there's manure in terms of composting or getting extra nutrition into the soil, it's important that we're still cognizant of the food safety element around organic foods. And organic produce can often be a little bit more prone to insect damage because you aren't using the same level of pesticides. Damage can occur. So there might be a little nick or a scrape. A leaf might, have been eaten by a worm or something. But that means that it's exposed, and other toxins and things in the chain before it gets to you means that it is a possibility. And proper cooking and proper washing of it is as important as we do with any of our other produce as well. But because there aren't other methods in play, sometimes the food safety element might become a little bit more important than some conventionally farmed things. Nutritional value is one of the kind of cornerstones of discussion around organic food. And often there's, the chat around whether there's actual better nutrition in organic stuff compared to conventionally farmed. And most of the research, and there was a review not too long ago from that little acronym is the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, one of the really good research bodies. There was a review published there that showed there were negligible differences in terms of nutritional value, spanning a wide range of organic produce, conventionally reared produce, to see if there was much difference, and it's not. So it's not superior from the nutritional value that's within the actual product. And interestingly, conventional methods might actually hold a bit of an upper hand here, because in those methods, you're allowed to employ various biotechnologies, and that can mean that you adapt your yield, or there's various things that you can do to change the profile of whatever you're farming or growing and actually improve the nutrient density of what you're getting. So whether it's done genetically or in the field or modified in whatever way, you can improve yields and the actual quality of what's going on. So sometimes the conventional can actually outweigh organic because there's more at the farmer's disposal. Then leading on to that is whether there are actually health benefits around organic produce compared to conventionally farmed and reared produce. And the first I just want to highlight, and it goes back to a little bit on the safety side, is that the health risks that are associated with pathogens, and those are some of the pathogens that you might just find contamination-wise or in the field because you aren't using any pesticides or herbicides or anything like that. And the likelihood is that the risk of being exposed to those poses a greater risk than those that are associated with small volume of possible pesticides or herbicides that you could ingest from conventional methods. So there's a decision to kind of make there in terms of where the importance lies for you. And then there's also the fact that because it's organic doesn't mean that it's any healthier or different to a pretty similar conventional inorganic. That wouldn't be true, but conventionally farmed produce. And the example I've used here is sugar. If you're having organic sugar or organic honey or organic butter or whatever the case is, compared to one that isn't organically farmed or produced, it's going to have the same impact on your health as each other. So if you're over consuming one, it doesn't help. The fat and the fat profile, for example, and a lot of things organic compared to conventional is the same. So there isn't really a benefit there of thinking, well, it's an organic cookie, so I'm going to have that because it's better for me than the other. It's purely a farming method that was different. The nutritional value is kind of the same. So if you're choosing it based on that health benefit, it's maybe a little bit misaligned. All right. Just to touch on labeling and go back to what I mentioned in the lead up as well, in South Africa, there's no legislation at a government level at present that governs what you can put on in terms of this is organic or not. So it's used as a marketing term. We do have certification bodies. So a brand or a company or a farm or something would belong to an organic certification body, and they'll be able to get the stamp as long as they tick off certain criteria in their production and preparation and how they get the produce to you. So, but that isn't legislated at a government level, so it means that there's very little downside to it. If you fall foul of it, the Act hasn't yet been updated for it to be policed much in any way. And this also speaks to greater issues in labeling in South Africa, that we're still a little bit behind. We're slowly improving, but we can't always trust what's on a label. We don't know what's really going on because our legislation is fairly poor. So we've got to be pretty careful in terms of choosing things based on what's marketed, what's on the front, even what's on the back and the nutritional info. We can't always trust it. So it's just a note to kind of be aware of that. How this then also ties into two other aspects of things that we see on the shelves all the time: free range and grass-fed products. Something that's organic or something that's free range, they aren't mutually exclusive. Free range doesn't mean that it's organic. Free range just really means there's a little bit more space for the animal, or the egg that came from the animal in the case of free-range eggs. But that space is also fairly limited. It doesn't mean they're wide open fields. I mean, in the case of chickens, sometimes that space isn't that much significantly different, but they do get a little bit more space to move in. So it's an ethical choice. Again, there isn't a health focus in terms of free range. Free range won't determine what they're eating, how they looked after. They might still be pumped full of all sorts of things, so you don't know. Free range doesn't give you much of an idea in terms of how the animal was reared, what it was fed on. It's really just a comment on space. So it's a little bit more humane, but not really a comment on anything else. So some of the methods might be similar to organic farming, but they might not be. They might also, allow, or they typically are using various treatment methods, medications, feeds, whatever, based on whatever their goals are. So free range and organic don't necessarily go hand in hand. And what you'll often see is grass-fed, and something I quite often speak to as well is grass-fed produce. Something that I believe in myself is trying to support that aspect of it. But even within that, it's a bit of a minefield. So grass-fed speaks purely to what the animal was fed, and in the case of beef or lamb or whatever the case is, grass-fed means purely that it had grass. It was given some grass in its lifetime. It doesn't mean it was only fed on grass. Typically, what happens is that it'll be used sporadically. So either the last little stage before it's slaughtered, or when it's raised in the first couple months, it'll get a lot of grass because there's some benefits to it, and I'll talk to those. But it also doesn't mean that it's free range or it's organic, but normally it does. You look for things that say grass finished. That means the animals had been fed grass its entire life. Right. Grass-fed would mean that a lot of that portion might have been corn. It might have been just fattened up before it went to slaughter. There might have been other things it was fed as well, but grass-finished means its entire life it was given grass to eat. And pasture-raised means it had that space. That's what it was, typically grass-finished. If you're looking for pasture-reared, pasture-raised, grass-finished, those are the terms that kind of mean something in terms of the space that they've got, what they've eaten. And the benefits here are two things, really. One of them being flavor. There's a very different flavor profile when you're getting something that has that grass-fed note nature of it. The color's a little bit different. So if you quite like that, it's, there's a flavor profile, but there's also a bit of a health difference or nutritional difference, that the fat content is typically a little bit lower, and the fat color you'll often see is a little bit different as well. And the sort of the distribution of fat of that meat is different. So you get a slightly healthier fat profile in grass-fed and grass-finished, and that's one of the reasons it's used a little bit more these days. Is it can be well marketed because there's a little bit of evidence out of everything else in terms of organic and free range, which there isn't really. At least on the grass-fed side, we know that does impact the end product, because that's what they've eaten and turned into muscle, whatever we end up putting on our plate. So the fat profile is a little bit healthier. Saturated fat is a little bit lower. Something called CLA, which you'll often see in the supplement aisle. It's a type of fat that has some health benefits, and we get it in grass-fed meats, which is why we try to sort of steer towards that. And the pasture-reared and grass-finished nature typically has a lot more care for the animal, a lot more space that it kind of ties into. Organic foods, grass-fed, free-range, they all kind of have comments and questions and issues that have other implications, and something that needs to sort of tie into your personal choice about whether you're actually going to be choosing those. One of them, and often the first one, is cost. It costs more to put organic food on a shelf, and that's why it's more expensive. It's also because it's a market that's grown and there's a demand for it. The marketers have increased the cost as well. So there's the cost implication of choosing organic, choosing free range. Grass-fed, also a lot more expensive to raise. But it does give us a wider wider range of choice. So as a consumer, we can make a choice of these things. We know that if price is a factor, it puts us into one aisle. Or if we want to, based on ethical, environmental reasons, we can look at things like organic, we can look at free range, we can look at grass-fed. So as a consumer, we do have choice to make, which is great, but as long as it's informed and we understand a little bit more about it, and it's not just a marketing ploy or because someone else has kind of convinced us to do it, but it's there to be made, and at least you have a choice. There's the environmental conversation and the piece that's come up a little bit here and there, which is twofold. So one, yes, we really want to protect the environment and do what we can, but we also don't know where that balance lies. The big solution of how we actually feed all the people on this planet doesn't have a solution that we can agree on, that we know is the best way forward. Conventional farming has its pros and cons. One is that you can get a lot more volume and yield out of everything. You can control for a lot more. There's a lot less waste. But it's also, how far do we push that? Are we overdoing it? And what are the downsides of that? Things like global warming tie into this, and what we're actually doing for the environment. Can we sustain people on more natural methods of farming? And it's also, how much are we reliant on these as opposed to things we can maybe also prepare ourselves and eat less of? A big thing here for me is I'd rather spend a little bit more per kilo on good quality meat, for example, that's grass-fed and I know where it comes from, but eat less of it. Same goes for sustainable fish or seafood. Spending a little bit more, but knowing where it comes from and actually eating less of it, trying to spend a bit more time and space in the plant-based space where, it's maybe a little bit more of a sustainable thing for us to produce and farm. The question of animal welfare, which is often a motivator to these things and making those choices, or even changing dietary habits away from having animal products at all. But understanding what it all means. So if you're choosing free range because you think that welfare of the animals improved, it's not always the case. So just digging a little bit deeper into where it's come from and what the classifications mean and what it all kind of works to. And a lot of this ties into food security, and what I touched on is how we actually make sure that there's enough food for everyone in the most sustainable way of carrying on with this, whether supporting things like organic farming methods are going to help that. Can we do that? Can we support things in that way? Or is the load and the requirements a little bit out of touch for what's actually going to be needed? All right. So that's a little background info into organic, grass-fed, free range, what it sort of means, and I want to catch up on some questions that might have come in sort of as we went through it. There was one I saw, let me just scroll down to it, from, there's Ismail saying, to be honest, you'd love to do organic, but it's not always readily available and seems to be super expensive. Have you started to grow his own organic veggies? Lovely. So I think for a lot of us, there's a big solve in that space. And to make use of whatever space that we have to grow a little bit of our own, and if it's herbs or things that last a bit longer, we can get a bit of a yield out of it. We learn a little bit about it, and that's great. It's hard to do it to an extent that'll sustain us entirely, unless we live on a small holding or something. But every little bit, I think, that you do will count. It will save you a lot of money. I mean, herbs, for example, you go buy one of those little ones, and it's whatever, 15, 20 rand, that you can grow with a little bit of love and water and seeds, and some things that'll keep growing. Mint, for example, you'll never, once you've planted it once, you'll never have a problem again. It's going to take over your garden. So there are things like that you can do and spend a bit of time in it, and you can make it organic if you want to. So you can find heirloom seeds, organic seeds, your methods that you put in there. You can compost from your kitchen. You can kind of do it yourself, because organic is a little bit more expensive, prohibitively so for a lot of us. And when there isn't necessarily an upside to it in terms of health, and you can actually have the environmental impact controlled yourself when you're doing it at home, why not spend a bit of time doing that instead when you are at the shops? For me, to be honest, I very rarely buy anything organic for those reasons. Then there was another question or a comment. I just want to scroll down to it. Nancy said, I find it so sad that all the free range and organic food so expensive than other options. And it is. So it is more expensive to produce, but it is a little bit, to be honest, my opinion, of a marketing thing as well, because we think it's better for us, which is one aspect. We do also think that there's the environmental or ethical side to it, which comes at a cost. And whether we're willing to invest in that and support that, it is great. But how do we sort of find the balance? So to me, it is spending a little bit more per unit, but having less of that. So when you have it, so meat, for example, just having less of it, but paying a little bit more for it when you do. So you can get the good stuff, the stuff that's maybe traceable, sustainable. In the case of lamb, personally, I only get stuff that's Karoo lamb of origin because there's a good traceability to it. It costs a little bit more, it tastes really good as well. But we have lamb sort of once, twice a month. So when we do have it, I don't mind just spending a little bit more, eating a little bit less of it, but I know where it sort of come from. Christina works in the fruit industry. Your conventional farm practices are very environmentally friendly and not according to international standards. So and again, there are people, and that's a great example where there's no need necessarily for them to jump through the hoops of wanting to get a little stamp on it that says this is organic, because of all the added expenses and everything. But that doesn't mean they're not putting love into their farming methods anyway. So it might just be that they're controlling certain elements because it makes much more sense. But the practices that are getting put into place are still sound. And that's important. So Christina, that's great to hear. Amalimo says, you like the idea of grass-fed after this talk? Good. Look out for it. Pasture-reared, pasture-raised, grass-fed, grass-finished. Those are the things that appeal to me when I'm purchasing and sourcing things. Organic and free-range, apart from free-range eggs, because it's better than nothing. But if you can find scratch hens or a farmer that's doing them, that's even better. Or if you've got neighbors that don't mind you too much, you can run a couple of chickens in your yard. We did it with some ducks for a while, which didn't work out so well. But that's another story for another day. Renata liked to spend more just to know that the animals had a nice life. And I think that's, it does speak to that a little bit, to know that, know where it comes from, what it means, and it's not just a steak on the shelf. And you completely dissociated from it entirely. And we do need to change our shopping behaviors to kind of support that. And the same with the veggies, you say, rather spend a bit more and you know where and how it was grown. Brilliant. Yeah, Nancy, so most things will say that it's grain-fed, but grass-fed you find more and more these days. It depends sort of where you are. A lot of sort of smaller butchers are doing it, but Woolies do bring it in now as well, but it's hellishly expensive. But we've got a couple of butchers, so obviously in Cape Town, I support to kind of know where it comes from and know where it's sourced, which is great. But online as well is super. Ismarie buys at her local farmers. If we can support local farmers more, I think it doesn't have to have a label on it. It doesn't need to say that it's organic and it's free range, it's whatever. You supporting the guy who's putting some love into his soil not far from you and he's coming to sell it to you. I think that's something that we should all support. Or versions of it. They're little conglomerates of farmers get together and they'll sell little veg baskets and, weekly deliveries and, fishermen that'll do whatever. I think if we can do more supporting that, it will go a long way as well. The produce isn't perfect, but you know where they come from. And that's, it's something I think that disappoints us as well, that we buy things because they look nice. So the peach on the shelf that looks pretty and beautiful, we're going to buy that one, not the one that's got a little mark in it or the knobbly carrot or whatever. And that's how things are actually supposed to look. But we've obviously kind of, the market's dictated that's what we need and what we choose. So we end up going for that. But it'd most probably a lot cheaper for us as well if we just got the stuff that looked a little bit knobbly. And there's some supermarkets in the UK that have done that, had a big shelf of things that don't look beautiful, knock down prices because it's going to waste otherwise. And I think food wastage, as more than anything else, is where we should be focusing rather than choosing to worry about the other stuff. So if you've got a local market, Joburg market, Randburg one, great, which is brilliant. And if you've got someone you can support, guys, do that. I think that's the crux of it. And if you can spend a little bit more but eat a little bit less on good quality stuff, you know where it's come from, it's maybe traceable, you can chat to the person who sourced it or whatever. Spend a bit of passion nourishing yourself, because it will make a difference. It makes a difference for you, and in the likelihood it's a healthier option, like in this case, the grass-fed and whatever. But you also may be helping someone else out, and there aren't a whole lot of hands in the chain before it gets to you. And that's my personal view on it. So, in a nutshell, I hope you found that sort of useful and just got you thinking about it, and maybe helping some shopping choices and things when you're at the store next. Guys, that's our week wrap. The last Jeff Ed for this week. Last thing, Friday, go and enjoy your afternoons, and join us tomorrow for Jeff Games, the first one. It's going to be epic. It's going to be fantastic. And go set the bar. Test yourself. It's all about yourself and how hard you can go. And then we'll pick it up with you guys next week again for a stacked week. Remember, one-on-one sales as well, guys. We've got an amazing 25% discount that's going. So if anyone here is interested in the one-on-one, you want to ask me about anything as well, feel free to get in touch. But other than that, have a super week. If you're on the challenges, finish strong, and we'll see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Cheers for now.